None of us is perfect. All of us makes mistakes in our relationships, both in our personal and our professional relationships. That's why learning how to make a thorough and complete and effective apology is one of the most important interpersonal communication skills you can possibly learn. In this video, I'm going to teach you what an apology is and how to make an effective apology. Hi, everybody. I'm Bruce Lambert from How Communication Works. This is a channel where I teach you about communication skills so you can improve your relationships, succeed at work, and be more confident. So let's get right into it. What is an apology? You can look at an apology from several different points of view. In this first slide, I'm going to refer to some PowerPoint slides here. In this first slide, there's a communication view, a psychological view, a sociological view. From the communication view, an apology is a kind of a speech act. That means a kind of action we do with words. And it's the kind of speech act where we address a past offense against someone, where we've transgressed some sort of moral norm, where we take responsibility. So it's a kind of speech act in communication. Psychologically, it's a sort of ritual of respect, where we demonstrate empathy and acknowledge harm to another person. And sociologically, it's a mechanism that restores the social order by taking blame for transgressing a moral norm and thereby restoring the moral equilibrium of interaction. One of the interesting things about an apology is it reveals to us that we live in a world of moral norms, that the self is sacred, and that when these moral norms are transgressed or violated, when these moral rules are broken, the equilibrium, the balance of the moral order of interaction is destabilized, and that it just doesn't feel right, and the relationship can't continue until the equilibrium or the balance of the moral order is reestablished. And that's what an apology does. An apology is an action in the social world that reestablishes the moral equilibrium. And that's why it's so powerful and important. If you like my style of teaching, I'm in the middle of preparing a course on listening called The Listening Leap. There's a link in the description, and if you click on that link, it'll take you to listeningleap.com, where you can download a free 10-page PDF listening guide. It's a great way to sign up for the waiting list and also support the channel. Thanks a lot for checking it out. What are the core characteristics of an apology? First of all, an admission of wrongdoing. You have to acknowledge in an apology that you have violated some rule, some norm, some expectation. Maybe you lied, you cheated, you stole, right? We think of what is the moral framework of the social world? You think of the 10 Commandments or the Golden Rule. These are the kind of moral norms that structure ordinary interaction in the social world. And when we transgress or violate or break one of these rules, and when we apologize for doing so, we have to acknowledge that we've broken this rule or this expectation or this norm. Second, we have to express regret. We have to say that we're sorry for transgressing this moral norm. And we have to communicate some genuine feeling of remorse for having done so. Third, we have to attempt to make a repair. That is, we have to communicate the intention that, part of the reason for the apology is our desire to mend the relationship by acknowledging the wrongdoing and expressing regret. This is something that's more subtle that we don't always think about. We have to talk about the moral norm that we broke. So let's say we did something that was disloyal. We were disloyal to a friend. We betrayed them in some way. We took someone else's side. Somehow the norm of loyalty to a friend was broken. Therefore, when you apologize, you have to talk about the importance of loyalty. That is, you have to say something like, I should have been loyal to you. You were correct to expect me to be loyal to you, and I was disloyal, and I apologize. It was wrong for me to be disloyal. So this is important because we have to remind the other person that the moral norm that we broke is one that we respect and is one that's worth upholding. And that's an important part of an apology, that we remind them that we didn't transgress this moral norm because we thought it was unimportant or not valid. We did so because we made a mistake. Finally, restoring face. So when we transgress a moral norm, when we hurt someone, when we cheat on them, when we steal from them, when we lie to them, when we're disloyal to them, when we harm them in some way, they lose face. That is, they can be humiliated or embarrassed or whatever. And part of what the apology does is restore face. It saves face for the other person. And it costs the person who's apologizing some face. The reason many of us dislike apologizing is because we can sense that it causes us, the apologizer, to lose face. That is, it's a little bit humiliating to have to admit you transgressed a moral norm, that you did a wrong thing. That's why children hate apologizing, because they can sense that they've done something wrong and that it feels bad to be humiliated. But that's part of the price you pay when you transgress a moral norm. It's to accept some ritual humiliation as part of the apology. So it's important to think about the attribution, the how we attribute causes and blame in situations like this. We transgress a moral norm, we lie, or we cheat, or we do whatever we're doing that we're apologizing for. The question is, why did we do it? And the person who's looking at our apology and trying to decide whether it's sincere or not is thinking, did we do this because we wanted to? Did we do it? Was it intentional? Was it unintentional? Is there some extenuating circumstance that caused it? And often, when we've done wrong, we want to explain why we've done wrong. And that often sounds like an excuse, and it's dangerous. But people will often want an explanation, like, why did you do what you did? And they will try to understand and make attributions. There's this interesting thing in psychology called the fundamental attribution bias. And that is, when we do things wrong, we want to blame them on external circumstances. I was tired, I was drunk, I wasn't thinking, I was angry or whatever. And we explain our own bad behavior with respect to external circumstances. When other people behave badly, we tend to attribute it to their moral character. You behave badly because you're a bad person. That's called the fundamental attribution error. And people will kind of think about these issues when they're apologizing and when they're listening to an apology. All the other thing that people will think about when they're listening to us apologize is whether it's sincere, whether we're apologizing because we want to assuage our own guilt, or whether we're apologizing because we want to put it behind us, or whether we're apologizing because we genuinely feel remorse for having done what we did. My advice is to sort of be sincere, and people can sniff out insincerity. They can tell when you're apologizing because you just want it to go away, or you want to avoid some punishment or sanction for doing it. You think, maybe if I apologize, I won't get arrested, or if I apologize, I won't get sued, or if I apologize, I won't get fired, I won't face some consequence. So for an apology to be sincere, it has to come out of a sense of remorse and regret and a desire to restore the moral equilibrium rather than just a desire to avoid some bad consequence. The timing is important in an apology too. So the question is, you can apologize too soon when people simply aren't, the wound is too fresh and they aren't ready to accept an apology. And you can apologize too late. That is, the harm has been done and it's been so long and they've moved past it and they're not interested in restoring the moral equilibrium of relationship with you. They've let go of any interest in having a relationship with you. So the timing is important. It can't be too soon. It can't be too late. And what too soon is or what too late is depends on the circumstances. There's no general answer to that. Like most things in communication, it's contextual and it's nuanced. So people will look for sincerity in our apologies. They'll want to know, does the apology reflect this genuine regret and remorse? But more so, is there a realistic commitment to change? When I talk about apology with my students and even just with friends and acquaintances, people will often say, the words in the apology are one thing, and you can apologize in a better or a worse way, but people are looking for the behavior to change. So if people apologize for, cheating you in business, and then later they cheat you again in business, the apology is not sincere. So we're looking for behavior change and a commitment to behavior change, not just the words. So this is Aaron Lazare's model of apology. I made a very popular TikTok a few years ago. It went viral, and it just lists these 4 characteristics of a thorough and effective apology. And they are, first, the acknowledgement. You must clearly identify the offense and take responsibility for it. Second, accept responsibility. That is, you can't minimize it. You can't blame it on someone else. You can't blame it on the circumstances. You have to take full responsibility. So let's say you borrowed someone's car and you crashed it. So you say, I know I borrowed your car and then I backed it right into somebody else's car and I caused a bunch of damage. It was my fault. I was being careless. So the first is the acknowledgement, then there's the acceptance of responsibility. It's nobody else's fault. I wasn't watching what I was doing, etc. And then expression of genuine remorse. I'm so sorry that I did this. You were so kind to lend me your car, and then I was careless and damaged your car, and I know how much you love it. I'm so sorry. If you ever let me borrow your car again, I would understand if you wouldn't, but if you ever did, I would be so much more careful. That's the commitment not to repeat the offense. And finally, an offer to make amends or make reparations or make the other person whole to make up for what they lost. So in this case, it's offering real compensation or symbolic compensation, depending on the nature of the harm, for the harm that you did. If something like you borrowed your friend's car and you wrecked it or you scratched it or you dented it or whatever, then you say, I will pay for all the repairs. So there you have it. Acknowledging the offense, accepting responsibility without excuses, expressing genuine remorse, and offering to make reparations or amends. So what's going on morally? I said before that the social world is a morally structured place. We live in a place where ourselves are sacred. That is, they can be violated. They need to be respected. And this set of moral norms structures our interaction in the social world and defines what our rights and obligations are to one another, and where we have a right to be offended, and where we have a right even to bring legal action in the form of a lawsuit, or bring criminal action in the form of, getting someone arrested and punished. And you can think of, like I said, the 10 Commandments or the Golden Rule as the basic way of thinking about the structure of the moral structure of the social world. So what's going on morally in an apology and the acknowledgement is this moral acknowledgement that what you did was wrong and caused harm. One of the goals of the apology is to restore the dignity of the person that was harmed. Because when we transgress a moral norm, when we lie or cheat or steal or do something like that, one of the messages that the transgression communicates is, you are not worthy. You are a person whose moral rights I don't have to respect. That is, someone with dignity deserves not to be lied to, deserves not to be cheated, deserves not to be stolen from, etc. And when you lie or cheat or steal, then you have, one of the things you've indirectly communicated to the other person is, I don't have to respect your moral norms. You're not really a full-fledged person. So the apology reaffirms a person's moral worth. And then, like I said, if you lie or cheat or steal or betray someone or whatever, you have to recommit yourself to the moral norm. You say, it was wrong to lie. It was wrong to be careless. It was wrong to cheat. It was wrong to steal. And reaffirm that you're committed to the moral norm. Even though you broke it, you still believe it's an important moral norm to uphold, and it was a mistake that you broke it, and you regret breaking this rule, etc. And finally, we have to accept accountability in some way. So this is a little bit redundant. Many people have written about apologies, lawyers and philosophers and clergy and communication scholars and sociologists and psychologists, and all these are just slight variations on the same theme. What does an apology have to be morally complete? It has to agree about what occurred and who's responsible. So you sometimes have to agree about the facts, and people will try to dodge an apology and not apologize for the really bad thing that they did, but maybe apologize for something more minor that they did. And they have to identify specifically what were the ethical principles or moral principles that were violated, and then reaffirm those shared values, express this unequivocal regret, and commit to changing behavior. This is getting a little redundant. It has to be sincere for an apology to count. And there isn't a perfect rule of sincerity. Sincerity is kind of in the eyes of the beholder, but here are some suggestions about how you can make an apology more sincere. There has to be clear ownership. So I was wrong, instead of some vague statement. Well, politicians and public figures and YouTubers will often make these very vague, kind of slippery apologies where it's a non-apology apology. And I'm going to get to some of those in a minute. But just saying I was wrong for doing X is the best way to do it, to take clear, unambiguous ownership without any hedging or beating around the bush or minimizing. Name the harmful act rather than generalizing. I'm sorry for, doing that bad thing. No, you have to say exactly what you did. And then you have to show some empathy. You have to say, I know when I was disloyal to you, you must have felt that I wasn't even your friend, or that I didn't care about you, or that you weren't important to me. You have to think about and express and articulate how your transgression of this moral rule or norm hurt the other person, and name the ways that it hurt the other person. This is a way of showing that you understood the depth and severity of your actions and their consequences. And then you have to be willing to listen to the other person. So an apology doesn't end when you say, you were kind enough to let me borrow your car and I wrecked it and I'm really sorry and I want to pay for the damages. That's not enough. And especially when it's more personal than just, destroying someone's car, when it's something like, sleeping with their wife or something like that, or stealing from them or cheating them in business or whatever, that you have to listen to what the other person says in response to your apology. And then they may want to really be angry with you, and you have to kind of sit there and take it. That's part of your punishment. That's part of the full interaction. An apology is a conversation, not a single event. And if they're really angry with you and want to tell you how they hurt you, how you hurt them, you have to sit and listen. So that's why, like in South Africa after apartheid, there was this Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and the people who committed these atrocities during apartheid, and then the victims sat and talked to one another, and the perpetrators of the atrocities apologized to the victims, and the victims got a chance to tell their stories to the perpetrators, and all of that makes for a morally complete and sincere and authentic apology. So what is not a real apology? There's many examples of non-apologies, and here's some characteristics. So things like, I'm sorry if I hurt you. that's questions whether harm even occurred. It's not sincere. It doesn't name the act. It doesn't pass any of the tests that I've articulated in the earlier part of this explanation. Or, I'm sorry you feel that way. You can't apologize for another person's feelings. You want to recognize and validate another person's feelings, but that they felt that way, you can't apologize for. And that's also not taking responsibility for the action, that you were the cause of these bad feelings. So I'm sorry that you feel that way. In the setting of an apology is not appropriate. There are other settings where you didn't do anything, but a person is very, very sad, where you can say, I'm sorry you're hurting, or something like that. I'm sorry you're so anxious. I'm sorry you're so sad. That's perfectly fine. But in the context of an apology, you can't say, I'm sorry you feel that way. No, that's not an apology. Simply saying the words, I'm sorry, and then making up some BS at the end, that doesn't make it an apology. Or using the passive voice, mistakes were made. Nope, 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 nope. Because there has to be accountability. You as an individual who committed the offense have to explicitly acknowledge that you did something wrong, that you take responsibility, that you regret taking responsibility, and that you're going to make amends. When you talk in the passive voice like mistakes were made, it's regrettable, stuff, that's not an apology. That's like weaselly words that are avoiding an apology. Or I'm sorry, but. So when you make excuses, you're not taking full responsibility. And as we've said previously, one of the essential elements of a complete and authentic apology is taking full responsibility. So how can you, if you need to apologize for something, what should you think about? So reflect. What did you do wrong and how did it harm the other person? And think about that before you go and attempt to make the apology. You need to know specifically what you did wrong and how it hurt them. Pick the right time. Again, we talked about not too soon. If the wounds are still fresh, it may be too soon. They may not be able to tolerate being around you. And if you wait too long, it's maybe too late. And you have to sort of know when they're ready to, you can't kind of corner them when they're busy at work and try to make an important apology or something. Then you have to deliver the apology that has all the elements, the 4 key elements that we've described before. Listen to their response. Let you have it. If they're really angry and they express that anger, you sort of deserve that because you transgressed the moral norm in the first place. So you got to listen to them express their feelings without interrupting them or trying to minimize and so on. And then if you've made promises to make amends, to repair the damage that was done, to pay back for any harm and so on, then you have to actually follow up. So what does this do to the receiver? I think an apology is just an unbelievably powerful, symbolic, ethical, moral act. Ritual act. It has the power to heal very significant damage. I've done wrong in my life and apologized, and people have been graceful enough to forgive me when I made a sincere apology. And there have been other times where I didn't apologize and the damage lingered for a long time. So the psychological effects of a failed apology and a successful apology are really powerful. It allows emotional healing when it's made effectively, because people are so wounded when people transgress against them. It really is an assault on our dignity when people treat us as if we don't matter, and as if our feelings don't matter, and as if they don't have to maintain moral obligations and commitments to us, that the moral obligations that bind everyone else somehow don't apply to you, and people can just harm you and transgress against you. And obviously that makes us feel terrible. And so when we get a sincere apology, we feel so much better. Cognitive reappraisal. When you get a real apology, it allows you the offended person to reframe the entire situation and start to put it behind them and forgive and move on past the harm that was done. And there's even physiological responses. If you've ever been really harmed by someone, it can sort of eat away at you. It can make you physically sick. It can make you psychologically and emotionally sick. And a sincere apology can begin the physiological healing as well as the kind of moral and emotional and psychological healing. Apologies can repair trust when it's been broken. It reminds the person who's receiving the apology that the relationship is important, that they are a person with dignity who deserves to have moral norms upheld with respect to them, and that there's a commitment to shared values. People in relationships where they can apologize to one another, because in relationships, it's inevitable that we hurt one another's feelings, that we transgress some moral norms. It's inevitable. We're imperfect. We make mistakes. So the ability to make apologies and to accept apologies is a part of being able to have long-term relationships. And I can think of some of my longest friendships where over the years, they've hurt me and I've hurt them, and we've had to apologize, sometimes after long periods of time, but it's important to be able to do so. And apologies can resolve conflict. And you see this both at the level of nation states where they apologize to one another, or in terms of historic wrongdoing, like in the case of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in South Africa, and also in interpersonal relationships. So what does a person need who's receiving an apology? They need their dignity to be restored. They need to be reminded they're a person who should be respected, where it's not okay to be disloyal to them. It's not okay to lie to them or to cheat them and so on, because they're a person who has rights in the moral aspect of the social world. The person wants their experience validated, that they were hurt and it was wrong to hurt them. They want these values of loyalty and honesty and trust and commitment and love and kindness. They want those values to be reaffirmed. They want to be reminded that they live in a world where those values are important and in the future they'll be respected. They want to be assured that they're safe. Like, one of the things we have to think about when someone transgresses against us, they lie or cheat or steal or whatever, we have to decide, do we ever want to interact with them again? Do we ever want to do business with them again? Do we ever want to deal with them again? Can they be trusted? Is it safe to be in an interaction with them? And an apology can do that. Even then, we might accept an apology and still decide it's not safe to interact with this person. It demonstrates understanding and empathy, or that the person receiving the apology wants understanding and empathy. They want to be seen and heard and understood, and they want justice. Sometimes, like in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in South Africa, the victims were already dead, or there had been decades of discrimination and abuse and exclusion and so on, in addition to violence and murder and imprisonment and so on. And people want justice, and not just monetary justice, but they want symbolic justice, a sense that a person who harmed them acknowledges the wrongdoing and regrets it and wants forgiveness and so on. So this issue of forgiveness always comes up in the context of apology. And what I normally say is, all you can do when you've hurt somebody is apologize in the most sincere way. You cannot make someone accept your apology. In fact, the person who receives the apology has no moral obligation to accept your apology, even though it's sincere. That's just the way the moral structure of the social world works. I think that we're morally obligated to make an apology when we transgress one of these important moral norms. But the person who's been harmed, it's up to them whether they accept the apology or offer forgiveness. You can refuse to accept the apology. You can accept the apology but refuse to forgive the person, or you can accept the apology and forgive the person. It's sort of up to the person who's receiving the apology. The one who's been harmed gets to decide that. And forgiveness is more than just accepting the apology. It's this deeper internal process where we can have a change of heart towards a person. And it involves releasing the negative emotions associated with the anger or the hurt that we felt when the bad deed was done to us. And we often, most wisdom traditions teach that forgiving someone is for you. It's not for the other person, because it lets us let go of the bitterness and resentment which eat away at you if you've been harmed. And it may take a lot of time. That's why you can't demand forgiveness on a particular schedule. You can't demand that someone accept your apology. What are the barriers to accepting an apology? If it's perceived to be insincere, people don't want to accept an insincere apology. If it doesn't have all those core elements, I don't think you're under any obligation to accept it. I mean, in general, you're not under any obligation to accept it. But at a minimum, you can demand a thorough and complete apology according to the standards I've articulated here. For some kinds of harm, for some kinds of betrayal, we just aren't able to accept an apology. It's just too profound. No apology will ever make up for the harm that was done. We're not prepared to accept an apology or to forgive. We want punishment or justice or something like that. Accepting an apology requires a certain amount of vulnerability. We have to let the person speak to us. We have to talk to them. And we may just not trust them enough to enter into a vulnerable relationship with them at all. We may not want to even see them or speak to them. And so they're not going to be able to accept an apology under those circumstances. So what's a checklist? Sincere intent. You can't be doing this in a self-serving way. It has to be done because you want to genuinely apologize, because you're full of regret and remorse and you want to make things right. You have to directly acknowledge the wrongdoing. You have to take responsibility, not blame it on circumstances or someone else. I was drunk, I was tired, I was out of my head, I was angry, whatever. No, you have to take full responsibility without hedge or blame on something or some other force or explanation. And you have to make amends. I know I've said this a bunch of times, but it's worth repeating. So apology is a foundational skill in interpersonal relationships. It has the power, unlike any other communication skill, I think, to heal badly damaged relationships. The ability to apologize demonstrates that you are a person who has ethical virtue and moral standing. And integrity. And we ought to be big enough to apologize when we harm people. It's not easy because of the self-humiliation that comes with apologizing. It's, I think, vital to have long-term relationships because we're always going to be in a situation where we owe people an apology and have to be prepared when we do wrong to apologize. It allows us to resolve conflicts, and it allows us to navigate these complex interpersonal challenges. So that's it. That's apology. It's a great skill to master. It's not easy to master. It takes courage. It takes integrity, self-discipline, the ability to withstand the temporary humiliation that comes with apologizing, but it's worth doing. And like many things that are worth doing, it's hard. If you like my teaching style, I've developed a listening course called The Listening Leap, and there's a link in the description and the end screen and in the cards below and in the pinned comment. Check it out. It's a great way to help support the channel.